live from Reagan National Airport in America. Our top story, searching for clues to the cause of America's worst air crash in more than 2 decades, as new footage emerges of the collision between a passenger jet and military helicopter. The faces of just some of the 67 victims, the passengers and crew killed as their aircraft was seconds away from landing. And as the investigation steps up, the White House doubles down on the president's claim that diversity initiatives have undermined air safety.
When you are flying on an airplane with your loved ones, which every one of us in this room has, do you pray that your plane lands safely and gets you to your destination, or do you pray that the pilot has a certain skin color?
Also on Sky News at 10 tonight. Despite the air crash, Donald Trump's relentless return to the White House continues, with confirmation China, Canada and Mexico will face tariffs from tomorrow. One of the most prominent and controversial Palestinian prisoners freed by Israel tells Sky News that the world denied him his freedom. The emails that suggest Prince Andrew stayed in touch with the convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein for longer than he claimed. And we will take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through until midnight.
Good evening. 2 days ago, American Airlines Flight 5342 was just moments from landing here at Reagan National Airport. Instead, the jet and a military helicopter collided, plunging both into the Potomac River. Well, divers are still working to recover the remains of everyone who was lost in the tragedy. And tonight, the search for the cause of the crash is still developing. The plane's flight data recorder has been found. Questions about staffing of the control tower have intensified, with our colleagues at NBC News confirming an air traffic controller clocked off early on the evening of the disaster. But there are continued and, to many, distasteful questions too from the White House about diversity, with Donald Trump's spokeswoman asking whether passengers pray to get to their destination safely or about the pilot's skin colour. Our first report tonight is from our US correspondent James Matthews, and I should warn you, it does include footage of the moment of the crash.
There is footage newly released, no less shocking. Video from airport security cameras obtained by CNN shows 2 clear angles of the collision. The moment a Black Hawk helicopter here on the left collides with an American Eagle jet. Wreckage is sent scattered into the Potomac River below. 2 days on, piece by piece, wreckage is picked from the water. This is how the crash investigation looked on the riverbank. Evidence gathering as investigators build a picture of exactly what happened and why.
I believe for us to recover the rest of the remains that we are going to need to get the fuselage out of the water.
On a runway just yards from the recovery effort, planes come and go once more. For now, there are restrictions on helicopter flight. Investigators have recovered the 2 data recorders from the plane. They've yet to locate the black box from the helicopter. Once again, the White House addressed diversity recruitment.
Okay, thank you.
In the aviation industry.
Do you pray that your plane lands safely and gets you to your destination, or do you pray that the pilot has a certain skin color? I think we all know the answer to that question, and as President Trump said yesterday, it's common sense.
Donald Trump had raised diversity as an issue, and he'd pointed the finger at the helicopter pilots. He did so again in a social media post, writing, "The Black Hawk helicopter was flying too high by a lot. It was far above the 200-foot limit. That's not really too complicated to understand, is it?" From opponents, there was reaction.
It's not a moment that calls for misinformation and misdirection.
From experts, there was perspective.
The helicopter has recorders on board. They have yet not been recovered. So that is one area, and that is probably the most definitive way to know the exact altitude of the helicopter.
This is a challenging crash investigation with the retrieval of wreckage around the recovery of victims underwater. The work of the investigators takes place in full public view, and it comes with commentary. On this story, citizen journalists are led by citizen number one, the president. Across the road from the airport, one man began work on a memorial to the victims of the crash. Beneath Washington skies, it is a gesture to remember the tragedy they'll never forget. James Matthews, Sky News in Washington.
Well, it is perhaps instructive of the destabilising impact of the White House attacks on diversity that only 2 of the Black Hawk helicopter pilots have been named tonight. The US Army said the family of the 3rd, who they had yesterday said was a woman, had requested their name not to be released. Well, these are some of the victims from the passenger plane who have been named so far. 34-year-old Jonathan Campos was the American Airlines captain on the flight. His first officer was Samuel Lilly, 28, and the crew also included flight attendants Ian Epstein and 34-year-old Danasia Brown. Among their passengers, Professor Keir Duggins from Howard Law School and police officer Pergentino Malabed Jr. There was also a group of ice skaters returning from national championships with their families and coaches. Former world champions Evgenia Shishkova and Vadim Naumov, a married Russian couple, were among them, as was competitor Spencer Lane and his mother, Christine. Another skater, Jinnah Han, was also on board with her mum. And among the 3 on board the helicopter was pilot Andrew Eaves. Our US correspondent Martha Kellner has more.
As the investigation into what caused this tragedy continues, families and friends are remembering those who lost their lives. This is Air Steward Ian Epstein, described by colleagues as the world's best at his job.
We know the reason we have jobs is because you guys are flying. We love you. We appreciate you. We are so glad that you're here.
His ex-wife said he died doing what he loved. Skating clubs across the US are mourning the victims. Several young elite skaters died on their way home from a training camp. This is 13-year-old Jinnah Han. Aged 10, she'd spoken about her dreams.
I really want to go to the Olympics step by step and trying to have my best opportunity to go to the Olympics and try to get a gold medal.
What year will we be watching you at the Olympics?
Probably 2032. I have no idea.
Jinnah died aboard the American Airlines jet alongside her mother, Jin. 12-year-old Olivia Turr shared the hope of earning a spot on the US skating team for the World Championships. She also died on the plane beside her mother.
We've lost 3 of our students and 6 of our parents, 2 of whom were staff members. And it's been heartbreaking as we've been addressing just the grief that families have had, that friends, that family members have had, and just such a heartbreaking loss.
Pilot Jonathan Campos also lost his life. He'd flown alongside a former colleague, Tracy Grubbs.
He was one of the best. Hearing what happened, it's mind-blowing. I grieve for all the people and the condolences to all the families. But the pilot of that plane, he was good.
Those killed included primary school children and grandparents, lawyers and teachers. They came from towns across the United States, Russia and China. Those they left behind, suddenly bonded by shared grief. Martha Kellner, Sky News, Washington, D.C.
Yeah, the stories and backgrounds there of some of those who lost their lives. Air accidents are mercifully incredibly rare, but near misses are another matter. In fact, there is evidence of the diversion of a passenger plane here at Reagan National Airport just the day before the crash. Our data and forensics correspondent Tom Cheshire has been taking a closer look at the investigation.
What happened in the Washington crash is horrifyingly clear, captured on camera. Why it happened isn't. The latest audio we have shows how the helicopter, coded Priority Air Transport 25, specifically asked for visual separation from the passenger jet, a model called CRJ. Now, visual separation means the pilot requested permission to proceed, taking responsibility to see and avoid the plane themselves. And they asked for that twice.
S25, CRJ in flight. S25, F1 is CRJ.
This club has an aircraft inside precision separation.
25, traffic just off the workspace CRJ at 1,000 north speed, start runway 3.
Visual separation.
Separation crew.
And this doesn't appear to be an isolated incident. Just 24 hours before, another jet here was coming into Reagan Airport. It aborted its initial landing and had to go around again. Why did it do that? Well, a helicopter was once again travelling up the same river. You can see its path is here in orange, and it's going right in front of the passenger plane's approach in blue. The dotted line here shows its planned route. In this instance, though, air traffic control warned the plane, and the pilot pulled up to gain altitude quickly before making its turn and later landing safely. For the investigation into Wednesday's crash, the US National Transport Safety Board said it would look at various areas, including operations, human performance, and then finally staffing. Now, this is important because it's been reported by our partner network, NBC, that an air traffic controller left work early, leaving just one person to monitor both airplane and helicopter traffic. Now, the Federal Aviation Administration's preliminary report into the crash said staffing at Reagan Washington Airport was not normal, its words. More generally, this data shows a steep decline in the number of air traffic controllers over the years. But this decline needs to be put in context, because the number of air traffic controllers required depends on the amount of air traffic. And this report also from the FAA shows the level of staff compared to the amount of traffic. And you see over the years, they have more or less tracked with each other. And then there's the question of how does that affect or not affect safety? Fatal air accidents are thankfully very rare, so it's hard to spot patterns in that sort of data. But this shows a more common occurrence, runway incursions. So that's where a plane goes, basically where it's not supposed to be. And this is the number of incursions per million takeoffs and landing. Now, the vast majority of these have no safety consequences at all, but it is a useful proxy of mistakes on the ground. You can see how they've gone up over the years. Actually, recently, they've been falling to pre-pandemic levels over here. Now, bear in mind that one board member of the NTSB, the safety board, said that staffing is likely to only be a small part of the investigation. The videos of the collision are strikingly, shockingly clear. The reasons so far are not.
Tom Cheshire there for us. So where does the investigation stand tonight? Our correspondent David Blevins has been following events for us. The light's really beginning to drop now, David, this evening at the end of day 2 of this recovery operation. And actually, there's been a lot of activity in the last hour.
Yes, a significant development. It would seem if we go to live pictures of what's happening on the Potomac River right now, we can see 2 different vessels. One of them is, we think, the salvage vehicle the recovery team were talking about bringing in earlier, and on board that vehicle, we believe a vessel, we believe there is at least part of the wreckage from the US Army Black Hawk helicopter. The Army has today confirmed that 2 soldiers killed on board were Staff Sergeant Ryan O'Hara and Chief Warrant Officer Andrew Lloyd Eves. But Reuters, the news agency, is reporting that the US military has taken the highly unusual step of not releasing the name of the 3rd soldier, a female who was on board at the request of her family. We know there's lots of speculation going on, reports about staffing levels in air traffic control, about how high the helicopter was flying, much of that fueled by the President of the United States himself. But at the end of the day, those investigating what is the worst airline disaster in America in nearly 25 years will be focused on evidence. So they'll be looking closely at the cockpit voice recorder, they'll be looking closely at the data flight recorder, and now they have also to examine this wreckage, which appears to be recovered from the water within the last hour. And it's going to be absolutely critical for those attempting to get to the bottom of what caused this terrible tragedy, and their work continues apace this evening.
Yeah, that recovery operation continuing. 41 bodies recovered, more salvage equipment being brought in tomorrow to try and lift parts of that fuselage out of the water. We know many bodies still trapped inside. David Blevins, thank you. We are waiting to hear from the National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB, a little later this hour. When that happens, we'll bring it straight to you. But now back to Kamali for the rest of the day's news.
Jonathan, David and team, thank you. Now, we'll stay in the United States for our next story tonight because the White House has said America will impose tariffs of 25% on all products entering the US from Canada, China and Mexico from tomorrow. Well, Donald Trump has also said he's planning something very substantial on tariffs against the European Union. So what impacts will the move have? Our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, has this assessment.
So we all know that Donald Trump has said he's obsessed with tariffs. But why is he obsessed with imposing tariffs on Mexico and Canada? After all, there's the US, there's Mexico and Canada. If you think back to his first term, it was mostly China that he was talking about, wasn't it? It was the economic relationship with China. And actually, if you look at what happened with tariffs in that first term, and what's tariff? It's basically just a kind of block, like it's a tax on goods coming into your country. It was China and Vietnam that had the biggest tariffs. The higher these are, the higher the tariffs are. And interestingly, Joe Biden kept those tariffs in place. Vietnam, by the way, because that's used sometimes as a conduit for goods coming from China. But Mexico and Canada, still very low tariffs, and that's because they're part of this free trade agreement in North America. But have a look at this, OK? This is showing you how much is imported from the main trade partners into the US. And this was the case back in 2018. So this is the first Trump administration. China is in the lead, then Mexico, then Canada. Then those tariffs came into play. And have a look at this. That red bar goes down. So less coming in from China, but considerably more coming in from Mexico, and more too coming in from Canada. And one of the things, to talk about that Mexico bar for a second, one of the things that Donald Trump really hates is deficits. When you're basically importing more than you're exporting to a country. And the deficit with Mexico has got bigger and bigger and bigger over time. And if you dig into the numbers, it's not just oil, it's goods, it's things like cars, precisely this kind of thing that the US would like to be making more of. So back to this chart, this map here, okay? So last time around, back in 2018, a lot of the trade from China was going directly into the US. Then those tariffs came into play. And now there's a suspicion that actually a lot of components, instead of going to the US, are going to Mexico and then being assembled into machinery and items and products that are going across the border. That's the suspicion here. And actually, if you look at how many cars are going from China into Mexico, that's been going up and up and up over time. Final thing, what kind of an impact would there be if those tariffs were to come in? Well, 25% tariffs on imports from Mexico and Canada. You're talking about a big hit for Canada. The bars are basically showing you how much GDP would go down. A big hit for Mexico as well. But interestingly, look, it's less bad for the US, but it's still bad. And it's negative too, even for the EU and for the rest of the world, underlining something that economists like to point to. Tariffs don't make anyone that much better off.
Ed Conway reporting there. Now, one of the most prominent prisoners freed by Israel as part of the Gaza ceasefire deal has told Sky News that the world, including the United Kingdom, has ignored Palestinians. Zakaria Zubeidi is the man to unite Palestine, one of his friends told us. Israelis, though, see him very differently. Our correspondent Adam Parsons reports now from the West Bank.
Returned to the West Bank and acclaimed as a hero. This is Zakaria Zubeidi, imprisoned by Israel for his part in a terror attack that killed 6 civilians. Now he's been released, viewed by his supporters here as a symbol of resistance. A man who briefly escaped jail by tunnelling out using cutlery. He told me what he wants now is peace.
We want a future, not for me, for my children, to live freely, safely and peacefully.
If you could live your life again, what would you change?
My life is worthless without freedom. The world that has denied me my freedom, particularly Britain, France and the US, must return what they have taken from me and my children. They are the ones who need to reconsider their mistakes, not me. They are the ones who have wronged us.
So I ask if prison has eroded his faith in resistance to Israel.
I believe in resistance that will lead us to freedom.
Alongside him, another prisoner, released after 23 years behind bars. He said his black eye had been a leaving gift from Israeli prison guards. But this line of people is growing all the time, with those who want to welcome back these two prisoners and give thanks for their return. And it is a perfect example of how this ceasefire has created contrasting opinions. Here, those two men are considered heroes. A few miles away in Israel, they would be seen as dangerous, murderous extremists. Among the well-wishers here, a former Palestinian Prime Minister, saying prisoner exchanges could be the catalyst for an enduring peace deal.
We would like to see all prisoners released, and we would like to see all hostages going home. It's a historical moment for everybody. It's time for this bloodshed to stop, and I think it is a moment of truth for everybody.
So what of the future? We meet Abdul Latif, who grew up with Zubaydi and Jenin and is convinced his friend can now change the nation.
He will make a balance in the Palestinian society, not just in Jenin, not just in Ramallah, not just in West Bank. I can say it's in Palestine. He's one of the most important people in the last decade or 2 decades in Palestine.
Zubaydi can't go home. He's banned from Jenin. Israel released him, but still fears his influence. Yet, as this ceasefire persists, this man's voice will carry weight. Adam Parsons, Sky News, Ramallah.
Now, a British-Israeli hostage held for 15 months in Gaza by Hamas has told the Prime Minister that she was detained in a United Nations facility during her captivity. Emily Damari also told Sakir Starmer she was denied access to medical treatment after being shot in the hand and leg. Downing Street says that Emily thanked the PM for the efforts to bring her home. The pharmaceutical giant AstraZeneca has announced it's ditching its plans to invest almost £500 million in a vaccine plant on Merseyside. In a blow for the Chancellor, the firm has blamed, in part, a reduction in support being offered by the government. Well, let's bring in our political correspondent, Liz Bates, who is on at Downing Street for us tonight. And Liz, this is especially embarrassing, coming just 2 days after that big speech from Rachel Reeves on growth.
It certainly is a huge investment and a huge embarrassment as well, not just for Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, but for the Prime Minister, because it wasn't just that speech this week. This government has hung the success or failure of the next 5 years on whether they can get growth or not into the economy, and it's deals like this that will, in the end, add up to growth. So I think it will be a huge disappointment in number 11 and number 10 tonight that this has fallen through. And I think you can see how fractured this relationship has become in the statements that have come out. Firstly, from AstraZeneca, what they say is, following discussions with the current government, we are no longer pursuing planned investment at Speak. That is the site near Liverpool that they were planning to invest in. Several factors have influenced this decision, including the timing and the reduction of the final offer compared to the previous government's proposal. So quite political there in their statement. The government have responded. They say a change in the makeup of the investment originally proposed by AstraZeneca led to a reduced government grant offer being put forward. All government grant funding has to demonstrate value for the taxpayer, and unfortunately, despite extensive work from government officials, it has not been possible to achieve a solution. So you can see, I mean, first of all, this was a deal that was announced by the former Conservative Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, back in his budget in March. Clearly, the incoming government over the past few months have not managed to get over the line. It comes down to money. They have not put enough money on the table, and that's why this has fallen through. There'll be a huge amount of disappointment in number 10 and number 11 tonight.
Certainly will. All right, Liz, for now, thank you for that. Well, Prince Andrew is understood to have kept in contact with the child sex offender Jeffrey Epstein for longer than he originally claimed. The Duke of York is believed to have told the convicted paedophile they would play some more soon, 2 months after he said he'd ended contact with him, according to new court documents. There are also new revelations today regarding one of the prince's senior aides and an alleged Chinese spy, as our royal correspondent Laura Bundock reports.
Just when you thought Prince Andrew's reputation couldn't fall any further, a new twist in his controversial association with Jeffrey Epstein. This was supposedly the last time they met, December 2010 in Central Park. The Duke of York thought he'd been honourable, personally telling the convicted paedophile their friendship was finished. But fresh emails from court papers suggest they stayed in touch. They read, on 27 February 2011, Mr Epstein emailed a member of the British royal family saying, Jez Staley, a former boss at Barclays Bank, will be in London on next Tuesday afternoon if you have time. The royal family member emails back, keep in close touch and we'll play some more soon. It's believed that member of the royal family was Prince Andrew. With some emails exchanged when this infamous photo was published. Taken at the home of Ghislaine Maxwell, it shows Andrew and 17-year-old Virginia Giuffre. Once again, the Duke facing difficult and damaging questions.
I think the real worry is that these legal depositions keep emerging and they keep changing the narrative that he's tried to portray.
What does all this mean for Andrew?
Well, it's just more scandal around him. It further undermines any confidence in anything that he's said. And I'm afraid it's a nightmare for the royal family.
Prince Andrew's a rarely seen royal. This, his last appearance almost a year ago. He was supposed to join his family for Christmas, but kept clear after his association with an alleged Chinese spy was exposed. Yang Tong-bo said the allegations against him were entirely unfounded. And now more court papers reveal Andrew's senior advisor admitted to Mr Yang that this notorious television interview was hugely ill-advised and unsuccessful. The Duke of York has always denied witnessing or suspecting any of Epstein's behaviour. Their association, though, cost him his roles, responsibilities and reputation. And years on still makes uncomfortable reading for the rest of the royal family. Laura Bundock, Sky News.
Finally, and in many ways it feels like another age, the night pre-pandemic when the UK left the European Union. Today, 5 years on, political leaders and the public were reflecting on the water which has since passed under the bridge, as our political correspondent Serena Barker-Singh now reports.
5 years since Big Ben boomed for Brexit. Big slogans.
I think things are going extremely well.
Bold promises.
Brexit means Brexit, and we're going to make a success of it.
But has anything changed? Today, YouGov polling found 55% of Britons think Brexit was a mistake. Half say they would also now support joining the EU.
I voted to leave, but I mean, I wish I didn't, because obviously there is a lot of stuff that we've lost as a country because of it.
Well, I remember waking up on the morning, hearing the news, and I've never felt so emotional about anything politically in my life.
I think the political class have got a lot to answer for these days. They've got to be really transparent with the people, give the people actually a voice, instead of saying one thing, doing another.
Why did it go off?
While public enthusiasm may have stalled, for politicians it's still a political priority.
5 years ago, we had what was the greatest vote of confidence in our country. And as Brexit Secretary, I removed lots of EU regulations. I ended the supremacy of the European Court of Justice. But there's still a lot more to do.
Others seizing an opportunity.
I think the Conservative Party, in 2019, they used Brexit for political reasons to win a general election. I mean, I even helped them a little bit with that, without ever fully intending to deliver for the people.
While pro-EU parties doubling down.
Liberal Democrats are going to lead the debate in Britain to have a closer relationship with our European colleagues. It's good for our trade, our economy, it's good for our defence and our security.
you'll notice we don't have pictures of the Prime Minister out and about today, unlike the other party leaders. And that's partly because the government doesn't particularly want to talk about Brexit if they can avoid it. They're straddling a position where they want to make Brexit work for things like AI, but they also say they want to forge closer relationships to their biggest trading partner. It's a confused message, and for the government, that's precisely the point. 5 years on, and just 8% of people now think Brexit is one of the most important issues facing the country. The government will soon have to decide whether it's a priority for them as well. Serena Barker-Singh, Sky News, Westminster.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's papers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by the Chief Executive of Total Politics Group, Mark Wallace, and by the Daily Mirror columnist, Susie Boniface. Among the stories we'll be discussing, this on the front page of the Telegraph, its headline, Trump kicks off trade war with China. And we'll also go live to Washington to hear from the National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB, about that air disaster from Wednesday. Stay with us.